You fucked that all up, man.
Hey everybody, this is Jason and my homie Christoph, and this is another video for Unchained Cinema, and not to be confused with Unchained Melody. So we are doing a kind of impromptu video today. There was like a lot of technical difficulties on my side. I will take that, and so the video that we had planned, which is going to kind of tie into our topic today, I didn't get a chance to finish watching, so I will probably end up watching it tomorrow. And I suck at life and so much stuff. But so I'll end up watching it tomorrow, and then we'll end up getting around to doing a video about it, hopefully in the next week or so. But we decided to take the director of that movie, and we're going to talk about the movie that you see playing behind me right now, which is Death Sentence. This movie is directed by James Wan. I believe it came out in 2007. And it's basically Death Wish, but for like a modern audience, which later on, shockingly, Eli Roth, who's buddies with James Wan, remade Death Wish with Bruce Willis. So it's kind of like, you know, a movie that has a very long list of a pedigree, if you will, of a revenge film. So with that being said, I'm going to kick it over to let Chris talk a little bit about the movie itself. And then I know Chris will talk a little. Probably he's even more passionate about this movie than I am. He even mentioned off camera that it might be his favorite movie. So obviously you have some really strong emotion about it. With that being said, so talk a little bit about this film, if you will, sir.
All right, so yeah, Death Wish is probably one of my favorite movies. If not my favorite, probably top five. So be careful what you say, Jason. But I know it did get a lot of flack because it was so much like the other movie you mentioned, and people were saying that it's just a ripoff. I haven't seen Death Wish. I think that's what you said it was. Um, but no, this from start to finish, this movie just keeps you engaged. It's got we talked about in the Under the Radar, you know, the exchanges between Kevin Bacon and John Goodman and the sheer violence of it. But basically, the story takes you of a kind of a white collar guy. His son's getting ready to go play hockey. His son ends up getting killed in a gang initiation. When the outcome of the case or the courtroom decision wasn't what he wanted, he just basically said, I couldn't recognize him, so that he could take matters into his own hands. So the guy that killed his son was let go. And he haphazardly murders this guy, which sparks a gang war between Nick Hume, played by Kevin Bacon, and this gang, which is led by Billy Darley, who is played by Garrett Hedlund, who did a fantastic job in this movie. If you didn't know it was him already, you probably wouldn't know just by looking at him, because he altered his appearance so much for the film. But that kind of takes you through the movie. It's shot very well. We were talking earlier about cinematography and kind of those unsung heroes for movies, which the director of cinematography for this was John Leonetti. Not too familiar with his work, but I think I'm going to go and seek out the movies that he does just because he's so good at what he does. With the way he shot it, I almost thought it was Michael Burgess, who usually works with James Wan. And Michael Burgess was a part of The Hunger Games, Divergent, Logan, Aquaman, The Nun, Malignant, which is the movie that we were going to watch. But the way he uses the cameras and how they float around almost seamlessly around the action, he just does a really good job with that. What are your thoughts, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I saw this movie in the theater. James Wan first, broke onto the scene with the movie Saw. At least for me, I'm assuming that's his first film. I believe he's Australian, from Australia, and he did the movie Saw, and it was, quite frankly, it feels like it's been played out nowadays, in the eyes of 2022. But when that movie came out, which probably was like 2004 or 5, I bet, or around then, the movie Saw came out. nothing had ever been done anything like that. It was the movie, the way the movie ends is so shocking that it caught people completely off guard. I'm a huge horror movie fan, so when this movie came out after that, I was just so impressed with that movie because the movie pretty much takes place like 2/3 of the movie like in one room between two actors. It's almost like a theater play. And that's interrupted by scenes of like gore and grotesque things. So when the movie Death Sentence came out, I was already hooked with that director, and then Kevin Bacon being involved in the movie. And Kevin Bacon, and quite frankly, is pretty great character actor, but he also could be a leading man, which is very few people can do that. In Hollywood, I feel like there's a handful of actors that can kind of pull that away. Johnny Depp's one of those people. Kevin Bacon can definitely do it. There's a handful that can do it, and do it convincingly. But when Kevin Bacon was doing this, I was like, I'm definitely interested. And it's a revenge film. There are kind of a dime a dozen. So for it to be something that actually sticks with you, it has to be a lot of great directing, intriguing story enough that keeps you interested, and then of course the actors portraying the characters on screen. And I just thought he did a great job. And the thing is that I think you might have mentioned this in the previous videos, but like Kevin Bacon, the whole movie is like just like a suburban white collar dad. Like he is just, he fumbles around trying to find a way to kill these guys or fight these guys. He's like super sloppy. He's getting himself hurt and beat up. He's, like drops the gun and can't put the bullets in the gun. There's all these things that are happening that's like real life, it's like realistic. And I think that's what makes the movie more interesting. It's not like he's this killing machine. He doesn't turn into like Arnold Schwarzenegger and it's like and just like I'll be back. He's like a suburban dad just fighting, taking the law into his own hands because of what he felt a perceived wrong that had happened. So, it felt very authentic, which again is very hard to do in movies, quite frankly, because they're so contrived and just so ridiculous. Usually even movies that are supposed to be based on true stories are so over the top now with ridiculousness. So I enjoyed it for those purposes. So what about you? Talk a little bit more about the movie itself.
Well, yeah, Kevin Bacon plays, an ordinary guy in an extraordinary situation, and he does things that ordinary people would do for the most part. I don't think most people would necessarily go out and buy a bunch of guns and go try to take these guys down. They'd probably try to tuck tail, but then you wouldn't have a movie. But
Right.
no, you talked about Kevin Bacon in this movie, and I my only real frame of reference for him was kind of Tremors, which he did a good job in that movie, but it was nowhere near on the same level as this. So between what was that? It was the one that came out around the same time as The Sixth Sense, Stir of Echoes. Between Stir of Echoes and Death Sentence, he like really upped his game as an actor, as far as my opinion's concerned.
Yeah, he's obviously I've watched a lot of his movies and some of his '80s stuff. That was a little bit more bubblegum, stuff aside from like Friday the 13th, But he's just like a typical teenager who gets killed in that movie. But it's like his first film or one of them. All the way through Footloose, he did, and then like he did The Woodsman, which is a really like dark movie. I think he also did Mystic River as an ensemble cast. He did really good in that movie as I think like a cop, like a Boston cop or something. He's done quite a few films. He's done tons of stuff. I can't think of it all right now. But those are the movies that kind of hop out to me with his like filmography. But yeah, he's a great actor, a great character actor, like I said. But go back to what you're saying, that those movies kind of both happen back to back, Stir of Echoes and then Death Sentence. Or at least it seemed like they were pretty close together. And I feel like it kind of jogged maybe his career a little bit more. It might have been kind of like at a lull, possibly. because again he was doing movies that were more like ensemble casts, or they were like a little bit more independent films. So I thought those are kind of like two bigger movies that kind of got his name back out there.
Yeah, and Stir of Echoes, that's another movie that doesn't really get any notoriety. And I couldn't figure out why. People I talked to, they've never seen it, never heard of it. And a lot of people suspect that because it came out, I want to say almost the same month as The Sixth Sense. There was too many other things going on at that time, so it just kind of got lost in the mix somewhere. So for those that are watching that haven't seen this Stir of Echoes, that was Catherine Irby and Kevin Bacon. I don't think there was anybody else notable in that movie. Um,
Uh, oh shoot, there's a the lady who plays his sister-in-law. She has like a bit part. Douglas, I think her name is.
oh yeah,
She's pretty
yeah,
notable.
she was in that.
She's pretty recognizable as well. She doesn't have a big part in nothing, but she kind of plays an integral part in the movie. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the movie basically is Kevin Bacon. It's basically it's a Kevin Bacon film for sure. But yeah, I mean, and to get back to this movie here, I mean, again, it's it feels like so real. And I like that about it. It is, it's an extraordinary situation happened to a very normal family. Like, and again, I can't I can't express that enough. Like for me, that it really hits home that this is just a normal guy punching a clock kind of job. There's nothing extraordinary about him whatsoever, about his family. Just like just a typical American family kind of feels like. And then it's in the wrong place at the wrong time. Um, so yeah. Anyways, there's a couple of silly stuff in there, like when he like shaves his head, like he like gets Siri, like that was like his way of like kind of like the old Kevin Bacon, or the old uh, white collar dad going to like kill mode or something. So that's a little bit silly. I think that was not necessarily needed. It's a good visual, I guess, to kind of show you that he's changing. That he's no longer the you know dad of the year, soccer dad, or whatever, hockey dad. He's like, I'm going to be this new killing machine, attempted to make everybody pay for their sins. So that's a little bit goofy, but outside of that, I felt like overall everything else about the movie seemed pretty real. Like
Well,
I don't think I'm going to do a even my head in the mirror going, now I'm serious. I'm Billy Badass now.
I think they kind of did that as a physical representation of kind of his metamorphosis from
Right.
the white collar guy to the guy that's now hunting these people down. And I thought it was interesting that they chose to make that haircut look so haphazard. Because as he goes through the movie, there's still like hair dangling down. Like the dude's like,
Yeah, that's true.
it's like something only somebody nutty would do. But I thought the movie also did a good job of kind of showing the family dynamics, right? Because Brendan, who was the older son, was kind of the glory child, and the younger kid just kind of seemed to be coasting through life. No one really paid. He didn't get as much attention as the other one, and it's one of those things that makes you, if you have kids of your own, I'm like, am I favoring one over the other because you see it from the kid's perspective, and it's a small part, but I thought it was impactful.
Yeah. Well, I think there's even a scene, if I'm not mistaken, I haven't seen it in a while, but that the younger son says that you loved him more than me, or you whatever, and he feels like his dad cared more about the older brother because he was able to live like vicariously kind of through the older son because he's playing hockey and he's like athletic and he's really into this stuff, and so is he. And the other son's not into it, so he feels like maybe he says something like, you wish I died, you wish I would have died, and what Brandon lived or whatever it was, and it was very real. It felt very real, again, the dialogue felt very real. It didn't feel contrived. I don't know if that's the right word, or forced. It felt like this is like what a teenage boy would say because he's hurting. He's the same thing happened to him. His brother died. It's the same type of loss, and he's getting from his dad. Like he felt like his dad rather him be the one that got killed, not the son, the older brother. So yeah, I feel like that all came across very well. But I think if I'm not mistaken, doesn't this scene right here, like he ended up killing this guy, basically on accident, but then they find out it's him and they go to his house and they end up killing his wife, right?
Yeah, well, they one of the girls, I don't know if she was a prostitute or what, might as well have been, but she recognized that there was somebody in the area that was kind of out of the context of the people that would normally
Right.
be around there. You know, a guy in a suit, and it's like, well, why else would a guy in a suit be snooping around? So that's how they kind of pegged him.
But my point is that if he didn't go looking for trouble, his wife would have lived. So he brought unnecessary follow up, heartache and downfall, and his son's getting ready to get smurfed up too. Now he of course lives, but it's barely. So it's like if he did not go looking for revenge, then his family would have been at a better spot than they end up being in. Correct?
Yeah, well, I mean, the movie wouldn't have happened otherwise. I mean, I
I'm
suppose it
just saying.
could have. It would just gone in a completely
I just
different direction.
like led up to that he turns into like a killing machine.
Yeah, it would have been a drama had he not done that. The whole movie, there's nowhere else you could go with it. You know, dealing with loss and how this family copes with the loss of their son under such violent circumstances. Because dude got his throat slit with a freaking machete.
That's pretty serious stuff.
Yeah, so I think if they hadn't done that, then the story would have focused on the relationship between Kevin Bacon and Kelly Preston and the younger son and how they get through all this. And I think a lot of those things, like, Lucas, who is the younger son, how he felt kind of left behind by everybody else, not as important. I think that would have been a big part of it, but I think it would have also strained the relationship between Kevin Bacon and Kelly Preston.
Yeah, I forgot it was Kelly Preston, which is John Travolta's wife, or was, and she does a good job in this movie. She doesn't have a huge part, but again, very believable as the mother, and she's grieving, and obviously it's terrible. So yeah, I mean, the acting in the movie is great. You alluded to the main bad guy, the leader of the gang or whatever. John Goodman's in this. He plays like a real, despicable character that has, you know, some sort of like what do you call like an honor system or something that he kind of adheres to, like a criminal honor code or something. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but it's kind of like that. And so there you have that kind of, but Goodman's really great in this as well. He doesn't have a huge part. It's definitely like a glorified cameo that he pops up in like I think two scenes basically. And that's essentially all you see of him. But it's it's really I do like his he's very memorable in his role.
Yeah, it's almost like kind of like the door gunner from Full Metal Jacket. It's a small role, but it's a memorable one. And
Right.
I really liked his character in this because John Goodman doesn't generally swear.
That's true.
He does a lot in this movie, so it's like when he does it, it resonates more.
Right.
And
You're not
I
you're not used to seeing Dan from Roseanne cussing. That's true.
and it was small, but I picked up on it, like how he keeps changing his glasses based on what he's doing. I don't know if you
Yes.
saw that.
Yeah, because he has like the monocle, like and then glasses or something that he can move around or slide over or something when he's looking at whatever. Yeah, that was cool. I mean, those are kind of like just like little touches to a character that makes it more like vibrant or fleshed out more. So I definitely like that about the character. But so when you saw this, uh, Chris, for the first time, what was I don't know if you saw it in the theater, I don't know if you saw it on DVD or whatever. What was your initial reaction once it was over with? Like you watched the whole movie, and what was your thoughts after you'd seen it?
I don't know. I saw this on DVD probably around 2008 or so. Um,
Okay.
I don't remember having any like serious thoughts about it. Like I really sat back and reflected. I think because by the time it's all over, there's been so much violence and carnage that you're just kind of drawn into that. But the more times you watch it, the more you get to understand the characters and the underlying themes. So I think it was more impactful probably the second or third time that I watched it. Because like I said, the violence and that was a lot of the that's what a lot of the critics said. You know, it was like almost Kill Bill style violence at some points, and it was almost comedic. Um,
Mhm.
so I think it really kind of takes the center stage is just the sheer violence of it all, and it kind of overshadows everything else.
But again, for me, the violence makes sense. These people kill his family. They kill half of his family, almost kill 2/3 of his family. His son survives barely, his youngest son. You're going to do violent things to terrible people. It makes sense. Like that's how this is going to go down. Like you're not going to go to jail or get yourself killed if you're getting into a slap fight. You're going there to to take these people out by any means necessary. So the level of violence that needs to happen here is extreme, which makes sense.
I thought while it was extreme, it was still done very well. I didn't mind the violence at all. I thought it added to it, but I would say from a one-time viewer, it would probably, like I said, cast a big shadow over everything else that this movie has to offer.
Sure. Knowing that he came from watching the movie or making Saw, though, I feel that the movie is restrained in violence. Because if you watch Saw, it's essentially as a torture film, and they use that as they coined the term between the Saw movies and like
Hostile.
Hostel porn. So it basically turned into like that kind of stuff. This movie is nothing like that, of course, in my opinion. It's definitely violent, but the violence makes sense as far as how the story's being told. It's not like he's not putting traps up like in Saw and watching people like cut their stomachs in half or their legs or dig into their eye or whatever it is that they're trying to do to get something. So you have all that.
Well, I don't know
Um,
if you just went in and watched this with no context, I don't think you would put it as a James Wan movie.
Yeah, that's true. And that's something I want to talk to you about also, is because James Wan he's one of the very few what would be considered probably a predominantly horror movie director who has been able to not be what do you call like pigeonholed into the genre. He started out with Saw, then he did Dead Silence, which is another horror movie. Then he did Death Sentence, then he went on. I think he did Saw 2, if I'm not mistaken. But he might have just produced Saw 2 and Saw 3, whatever. But he went back to he kind of hung out in the horror genre. But then he started doing like more like ghost house movies with Insidious and Conjuring. But then all of a sudden he ends up taking like a complete left turn and does like Fast and the Furious, like Part 7 or whatever. Then he ends up going to do
Aquaman.
Aquaman, and which is nothing like these other movies. And then he goes back and does like Malignant. So very few horror movie directors can do that, where they can do. Unfortunately, get stuck in the genre, and you rarely can get out of the genre once you start making movies. Especially if you get well known at doing it well, it's very hard to get out of the genre. It's like they just look at you as a horror movie director. I mean, all the great horror movie directors out there, I mean, whenever they got a chance to do a non-horror movie, like no one went to watch it. And so then they end up having to go back to do horror because that's the only time they can make money. Wes Craven, Toby Hooper, John Carpenter, who else? George A. Romero. I mean, these are the guys, Eli Roth, talking about Rob Zombie. These are all guys that are essentially like horror movie directors. They try to like go a little bit venture out some. I'm trying to think of like, I'm sure there's, other directors I can't think of at the top of my head, but that's a good list right there that never really got any traction. And they all did other stuff or tried to, but no one would go watch their movies if it wasn't horror related. So James Wan, shockingly, was able to not get pigeonholed into that. I think I've seen pretty much all of his movies, probably except the Fast and the Furious. I don't care about that franchise whatsoever. But like I saw Aquaman, I like Aquaman. I mean, it's one of the few DC movies that I actually do like. It's not great, it's not fantastic. Also, I have nothing invested in those kind of characters. So if it like keeps me entertained for an hour and a half or 2 hours, okay, fine. Like you did your job as a superhero movie, right? So that was fine. But all his like ghost house movies and like horror films and all that stuff, horror. I've enjoyed extensively. I mean, Death Sentence is not a horror movie; it's more of a revenge flick or whatever. I mean, I wouldn't really consider it a horror movie, but I mean, he's done a great job from the get go, which is impressive because again, most directors who start out in horror will very rarely get the opportunity to get a shot at other films and be able to say I can do both equally as well and still have some traction. Like I guess the only other director I can think of that was kind of he was more of a comedic director, but he dabbled in horror was John Landis. John Landis did Animal House, right? I think he did Animal House, and then he did like Coming to America, but he also did American Wolf in London. He did stuff like that. So I mean, he was able to do both and have success in both films. So, anyways, not to go on a tangent, but that's kind of my views. What about you? Have you seen some of his other films, and what's your thoughts in general?
Well, I was just going through his list of credits. He doesn't have many directorial credits. He had Stygian in 2000. Then you said Saw, Dead Silence, Death Sentence, Insidious, The Conjuring, Insidious 2, Furious 7, The Conjuring 2, Aquaman, and Malignant. That's pretty much it. But he did have a lot of producer credits. He was the executive producer for Saws 2 through 6 and the final chapter, Annabelle, Demonic, Insidious 3, Conjuring 2, Lights Out, Annabelle Creation, Jigsaw, Insidious The Last Key, The Nun, The Curse of La Lorna, Annabelle Comes Home. So I've seen a lot of those. I've seen pretty much everything from the Conjuring universe. I would say, with the exception of La Lorna, I tried to watch it and I just kind of lost interest. But I might have to go back and revisit that one.
All right. And which stories that he's written? Are you able to see which ones he wrote?
Yeah, he wrote Stygian, Saw Rebirth, the Scott Tibbs documentary, Saw 3, Dead Silence, Doggy Heaven, Saw, Insidious 2, Conjuring 2, Saw Heritage, She's Here, The Nun, Aquaman, Annabelle Comes Home, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, Malignant. He helped me a fan film from the Book of Saw, and then he's got a couple in post production and announced.
Okay. So, I mean, if you think about this, I mean, the guy, even though not all of his movies he directed, or not all the movies he's associated with he directed, but he's produced a ton. He's wrote a ton. Some of those ones he wrote, he obviously did not direct. So, I mean, this guy's been busy, and he's kind of all over the place, which is great. Again, he's one of those few directors, in my opinion, that has been able to not be cursed with a horror movie like
Typecast. I said kind of typecast.
Right, yeah, typecast, totally, typecast, right. He's been able to avoid that. Now, I don't know how he's been able to do it, but he has, and I think it's great because very few directors, like I said, can be able to get away with that. The only other two directors I think in modern time that's been able to hop genres as easily and as successfully would be Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino. Those guys have not been penciled into one specific genre of film, and especially Robert Rodriguez, he's very extreme as well. Like Tarantino kind of stays in a very like a thread in his universes that don't feel too crazy extreme from one to the other. But Robert Rodriguez, he's done comic book films. He's done Mexican, Mexploitation almost exploitation films of like Mexican actors, and that he's done Hollywood type movies. He's done independent films. He's done grindhouse films. I mean, the guy's all over the place too. And then James Wan obviously is in the same boat. Quentin Tarantino is not making superhero movies and stuff like that, so that's totally different there.
Well, I
But
think I'm wondering if he just kind of. I think he's very selective. He stays pretty much James Wan stays within the horror realm, but if there's an opportunity, and he's probably got enough self awareness to be like, I can make something out of this, or that's not really my thing. So that's why I think you see little ones peppered in here and there, but that when they're done well.
that's the thing. But think about this. I mean, James Wan has been given the opportunity. The guy who made Saw is the same guy who did Aquaman. Like that is not a scenario that would almost ever play out. I can't think of another director that has a very similar trajectory like that, where you go from a movie that's considered torture porn, that's extremely violent and bloody and gory and gruesome, that does like a kid's, superhero movie. And I think that's great. It goes back to what you're saying. Like he has talent. Like he can do it. I think Aquaman. I think most people. I agree. I don't know. Have not really crapped on Aquaman. And most people thought like it was a pretty decent movie. Wasn't the best though. But again, it was not laughable like some of these other like Wonder Woman Part Two, which is just an awful piece of garbage. So I believe that you have that. So I do think that obviously, like you said, he's been given opportunities that again other directors in the genre would never be given, and he's hit a home run, I believe, with them. I mean, Fast and Furious. I mean, you just slap whatever Fast and Furious on anything, and it's gonna make money. So I feel like sometimes whoever behind the camera might be inconsequential. So
Yeah, well, I mean, he had a pretty extensive team for Aquaman too. When you look at his other works, they're pretty concise in terms of who's working on it. But this had one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10 different producers. Um,
Aquaman,
yeah,
well, that
uh,
makes sense because the huge Warner Brothers slash DC property, so they're gonna probably have all their hands in the cookie jar.
and you had like 15 alternate directors or assistant directors, and I think there was like 7 or 8 different writers. So I think they just used him for direction of the film, and there were so many other people that it made that possible. Like I said, his other stuff seems to be pretty bare bones.
Yeah, well, I'm sure those. I mean, we all probably know that when you're dealing with a huge studio movie involving superheroes, they're not gonna let you go out there and do your own vision. They're gonna make sure you do the vision they want to see on camera. So you're not gonna get a whole lot of probably freedom, I would assume, in creating your quote unquote vision for a superhero movie. I mean, that's what happened with Scott Dickerson, who did the Dark Doctor Strange movie. He made the movie he wanted, and then for the most part, what I felt like because Doctor Strange again, I think they didn't have a lot of movie money invested in thinking how big that movie is going to turn out to be, kind of with the Guardians of the Galaxy and James Gunn. And then the movie got huge, and then they ended up putting Doctor Strange in almost everything. He kind of became the Tony Stark of the universe because Tony Stark, got killed off. And then when they want to go back to do part two, Scott Dickerson wanted to do a horror. Doctor Strange, like waiting because he's a horror movie director also. That's his genre he likes dealing in. So he wanted to make a darker, more gritty Doctor Strange. And the studio was like, that's not what we're doing. So most directors will be like, well, whatever you tell me to do, I'll do because they want the paycheck. And Scott Dickerson was like, you know what? I'm good. I'll just leave. So he left the project. So James Wan probably went into a situation and knew, like you said, there's going to be a lot of people who have a say so on how this movie's going to turn out.
I was reading this. I was looking at this article, and they interviewed Toby Emmerich. He's a film chair at Warner Brothers, and kind of the bottom line up front is James Wan's a franchise maker. he makes franchises that last forever and people love them. Because he started the Conjuring, the Saw franchise, and he didn't start the Fast and the Furious, but Fast and Furious Set or Furious Seven was like the highest grossing movie from the series. Um, and he's produced with Warner Brothers and New Line, so like they know him real well, so they have a good working relationship. So I mean that makes sense from a marketing standpoint, is you have this guy that can make movies that endure for years to come. What better way to start something like Aquaman to kind of bring DC movies in a position where they could even compete on any sort of level with the Marvel franchise?
And I don't. I'm assuming he's going to come back for Aquaman Part Two.
He
I
is.
could be wrong,
He
but I
is.
would assume it is. I mean, usually once you're a director who's successful, they're going to let you keep coming back until you either don't want it or that you drop the ball. And they're like, all right, well, the mojo ran out. We're done with you for now. So, but yeah, I think that he's as a director, like you said, he's a sure hand. You know, you're going to get above average to great quality film from him. I don't think we can say any director's hit a home run every time, but he's definitely hit a bunch of triples. Maybe not a home run every time. So he's definitely make a movie where people go out and watch it, and that's great. But at the end of the day, he's said this before in interviews. He is a horror movie fan who likes to make horror movies. I mean, he is a fan of the genre. That's obviously where his passion is. That's what he keeps going back to as well. So we all know that whatever he does, these projects, maybe he's there to pick up the paycheck, get some more freedom when he wants to do his own projects. Then they're like, hey, you do this big budget movie? Yes, we'll give you an eighth of the budget to go make your film you want. If you go do this for us, I mean that's why you have a lot of these famous actors who do that stuff too. They'll do these like smaller roles or even a huge big role so they can go do the independent, the movie they really want to go do. So they show up in like a big budget movie because the studio promises them like 3 films if they do it and stuff like that. So I'm sure James Wan had those kind of deals with Warner Brothers, like you said, New Line. It makes total sense. But anyways, to get back to the movie a little bit, I guess. Um, as you all would expect, the movie ends up, taking off. Obviously, the older son passes, the wife ends up getting killed, the youngest son ends up being like almost killed, and then again, Kevin Bacon ends up taking the law into his own hands, and as you would, we alluded to, and as you can expect, he will eventually come out victorious, taking out the entire gang of bad guys or whatnot. He picks them off one by one until he gets them all. And then the movie, essentially ends, on that note of his son getting through and surviving his youngest son, and him kind of, getting revenge from the gang. And I think that isn't the police are kind of like onto him, and they're trying to catch him with his hand in the cookie jar, but they eventually like know that he's doing it, and then just let him go. They're like, it's fine. You're good to go. You took care of the trash. I can't really remember how he got off the hook. Do you remember?
What, at the end of the movie or?
Yeah, at the end, like he doesn't go to jail.
I don't remember if they actually showed it or if they kind of left it up to your interpretation. But after the battle royale at that seedy looking freaking crack house they were in, he comes back. He drives home and like took Billy Darley's car and like rides up on the lawn and just kind of stumbles in all shot up and lays on the couch and is watching home videos. And I think he died. I think it's been a few
Really?
months
Okay. I don't remember that. So yeah, it's like I said, it's been a couple years. I'm gonna go back and rewatch it. So
because
that's good to know.
he's just bleeding out on the couch, and then the police officers come in. Like I said, I don't remember if he kind of faded out and died, or if they just kind of left it to your interpretation.
That's good. I have to go back and like I say rewatch that because I don't remember how it ends. That's interesting. I feel bad that for that poor kid like Lucas. His whole family's dead now.
Yeah,
He'll end up becoming like an official like assassin.
Well, I mean, James Wan's a franchise maker. We're gonna bring this kid back and have.
Like the Deadly Viper Squad from the Kill Bill movies. Become
Yeah.
an assassin.
Start
But
filming in 2025, 2026, and have it be 20 years later. And now Lucas is like in his mid 30s.
yes, I will sign up for that action.
I just don't
To
think
be
there's
honest,
anybody left to kill.
he
No, there's nobody left to kill. He got them all.
a whole new group. He has to. He had to get them. So skinny John Goodman too, not heavy set John Goodman. Yeah. So, but anyways, any final words on the movie itself or director James Wan?
The only thing I would say is I would not listen to the critics, and I would, if you haven't watched it, I would definitely watch it and make your own judgments and opinions. Um, some of the blood and the gore is a little over the top. There was one scene in there where he broadsides that panel van and it like breaks in half, which was just completely unrealistic. It's like they sawed it in half, propped it together, and when he hit it, you could see this thing just break in half. It was pretty ridiculous. Um, but no, like I said, it's probably in my top five favorite movies. It's one I go back to anytime I just can't figure out what I want to watch. I go back to Death Sentence.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great movie. I don't know if it's in my top, whatever. I'm sure it's not, but it's a great movie. I respect the heck out of James Wan as a director, as a visionary for sure. And then Kevin Bacon. I mean, this movie is on Kevin Bacon's shoulders. I mean, he carries this movie 100%. I mean, if he didn't do this job that he did, no one would remember this film. It would not have done anything. But Kevin Bacon completely is believable as this character, as a father who loses essentially everything because of what has happened to his family. It's 100% a believable character and outcome, I believe, as well. It's something I think anybody would feel like they want to do who have been wronged, but society and reality of knowing that you're probably never going to be like the guy that's like, I'm going to go get a couple sawed-off shotguns, shoot my head, and go take care of business. Like, that's not real life for like 99.999% of people. But it's kind of a fantasy that you want to believe that you would be that guy that happened to your family, that you would do that, and it was done in a way that it felt realistic. We talked about that. So overall, I think the movie's great. I've enjoyed it. I enjoyed it tremendously. I do, but like you said, Chris, I think it has a lot of rewatchability to the movie. There's a lot of nuanced things that happens throughout. See the progression of Kevin Bacon going from like mild manner, upper management at whatever, law firm or whatever he was doing, to like quasi Sylvester Stallone, Cobra. I was like taking people out. You're the virus, I'm the cure. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So this is kind of us as like riffing on Death Sentence. Hope you all enjoyed it. I know it wasn't like we meandered a bit throughout the conversation, but I hope you all enjoyed. It's a movie that Chris has championed for quite a while. It's a movie I believe that should be seen by more people. If you have seen it, leave a comment below. What do you think about the movie? It's definitely a movie worth watching at least once. If you like dramatic things, you like thrillers, you like I said, revenge flick. All three of those things are this movie, I believe. If you want to watch great directing, great acting, great cinematography, it's another good observation there. But I think overall, it's a good way to. There's way worse ways to spend an hour and a half of your time. That's for sure. So, with that being said, I appreciate y'all watching. My name is Jason. That's Chris. Over there, where you're at. And hopefully you'll check it back in with us when we do Malignant next week. And until that time, peace.